Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Hi, this is Henry Gilroy, co-executive producer of Star Wars Rebels. You're listening to Aggressive Negotiations.
Welcome to Aggressive Negotiations, the Star Wars podcast on the Nerd Party Network that casts a wide net across a diverse galaxy in search of all of the topics that sometimes slip by you. I am one of your hosts, Jedi Master John Mills, and with me, fresh back from his own trip to Dragon Con, Jedi Master Matthew Rushing.
You know, it's so great to be back, John. You know, I got to say, being surrounded by crate dragons for the week, you know, trying to find that elusive pearl for my lightsaber, it's been difficult, but I finally found it. And goodness, does it look good. I got to say, by the way, wait, never mind. I'm sorry. Fans, you can tweet out at John Mills at Kessel Junkie to tell him why he wouldn't understand that reference, because it's a KOTOR reference, and John's never played KOTOR.
You know, that's true. I have not ever played Knights of the Old Republic, but you can tweet out to Matt at MattRushing02 on Twitter and let him know not only do I own the game, but I still haven't played it. So do with that what you will.
So sad, my friend. Oh, you got to play it, man. This story is so good.
While you are tweeting at both of us, you can also let us know that you went over to thenerdparty.com and dropped us a line at thenerdparty.com/contact. And also at the Nerd Party, of course, you can check out all of the terrific shows that we have: Doctor Who, Harry Potter, Star Trek, this show for Star Wars, Nerd Nuptials, all of those things. And the Nerd Party has just debuted a brand new what are we calling it? A vidcast? Video series.
Vidcast, I think, yeah.
Yeah. Well, a vidcast. Babel for 5, a brand new Babylon 5 video series with our own Charlene Schmidt and her husband Patrick, and they are going through, it's his first time watching Babylon 5, so you're going to get to see a video series of somebody's reaction to a legendary sci-fi show with a legendary fan base. And, of course, you can find the Nerd Party on Twitter at Join Nerd Party, and on Facebook and Instagram as The Nerd Party.
So I have a question real quick.
Oh, no, please, yes.
I wanted to just ask you, you know, your first time at Dragon Con, what was your experience like? What did you think?
I thought that Dragon Con was an overall very positive experience. I enjoyed meeting so many people and getting to know other Star Wars fans. It's always fun because everybody's fandom is unique to them. And finding so many unique combinations in one place is endlessly fascinating. I think that probably I will question every day for the next however long why it's not in a convention center as opposed to hotels. But that's just the planner brain in me going off. But, so I had a good time, and I'm pretty sure, Matt, you had a good time as well.
Yeah, I did. You know, and I agree with you. It is a very strange con because it's in all of these hotels. It creates a very unique formula, I think, though. And there is something really special about it. You know, having been to a few different conventions now, and even like a celebration, you know, there's something special about Dragon Con and the experience you get with the people that come, the fans, and then, you know, especially the stars that come as well. You know, there's a real openness with them, which I think is fantastic, and they seem to be there because they love the fans. You know, I know our friend Henry Gilroy has said that's one of the main reasons he goes, is because there's such a connection with the fans, and it's just this place to really celebrate the things that you love, you know, and I think that's the thing that I really love about it. And getting a chance to just be involved as well with the Star Wars track, as we both did, it's just been a huge blessing. I've met so many people that way, and like you said, just so many fans from all walks of life. It's a lot of fun, and so, it's just a really great place to be.
Well, yeah, it is fun, and I do think in terms of the connection to the celebrities that are there, they seem much more approachable in that environment than a lot of the other conventions that I've been to. So it definitely has that going for it. And their appearances on the panels, I do give Dragon Con a lot of credit for ensuring that the panels always had people on them that made each session, at least each session that I attended, worth attending. And I can.
I mean, that's because you didn't come into any of my panels, and you're
Oh,
like,
I did too. And you know what? That your panel on Rebels, which Henry Gilroy was on, actually, and Timothy Zahn was on. It actually serves as the inspiration point for my question to you, because I found it fascinating, and I would have loved to continue going down, because it was also a point of disagreement between Henry Gilroy and Timothy Zahn as to whether the Sith had ever discovered a way into the world between worlds. Henry decidedly said, no, the Sith get in there, big problems, they're going to misuse and abuse the power, it's going to throw everything out of balance. And Zahn had the perspective of, well, why not? Maybe just once or twice or something like that. Maybe they got in there and, then they lost the ability somehow. You could sort of see the two different approaches coming at it. And so before I weigh in on either viewpoint, I wanted to establish here, which side do you lean toward? Because of course we can always find ourselves suddenly presented with different options as Star Wars fans, surprising story options and everything. But where does your inclination lead you with the world between worlds and whether the Sith ever found a way in?
I was just, the moment you said, maybe once or twice, I was just like, once, twice, 3 times a Sith Lord.
I like it. I like it very much.
That was actually, Darth Bane's theme song. So, yeah, really awkward to go into his presence because he'd have it playing every time you walked in. It was, anyway.
He had a Kowakian lizard monkey singing it on his shoulder.
Exactly,
yeah.
Exactly. It was such a fascinating question because I had actually never thought of that idea until, hearing the discussion on the panel. And Zahn is just rife with interesting ideas anyway. I mean, with him as a writer, he's come up with so many great things in Star Wars, whether it was Legends and, now having the opportunity to play with Thrawn and canon. And so to me, it's something that I had ever thought of. But as to whether it had ever happened, I probably land on the side that Henry does. And the reason being is because as I'm thinking about why would Jedi have been the ones to discover this and not Sith, it seems pretty clear to me that because the Jedi come from a more centered and selfless place, that it would be that type of character which the Force would then open up a world like this to them and allow them to explore it, because the Force can sense their character, could sense what they would want out of something like this, that it wouldn't be used for, ill-gotten gain and deceit and lies and terror and, trying to take over the galaxy, that the goal would be to be so in one with the Force that this really is about knowledge and wisdom. And so to me, that's the thought that comes to my mind as to why I don't think a Sith would ever have experienced this before. But also, connecting all the way back to Mortis, we know the Mortis gods are connected with this kind of world between worlds. Mm-hmm. And, in the Mortis episode, we get the feeling that the Jedi have met the Mortis gods before.
Yeah, because they actually pick up a signal on an old Jedi code that was like 2,000 years old.
Absolutely. So, and it makes me wonder, with so much of that kind of tied in, it seems like there's a very rich Jedi history, a few thousand years ago, that would be fascinating to understand and discover how the Jedi of that time period were discovering these things and meeting beings like the Force gods and running into something, or maybe even being introduced to something like the world between worlds, and that it's a place that, very few Jedi kind of know much about at this point. Because, And it also seems to be connected with the Yoda arc because, Yoda and his experience with the Force priestesses, and Yoda appears to, Ezra in the World Between Worlds when he first gets his, lightsaber crystal. So all of these things seem to be tied together, and what the common bond seems to be this link of people who are desiring an unselfish understanding of the universe that they're in, and being willing to have their preconceptions challenged and to let go of those preconceptions for true knowledge and true wisdom. So, all that to say, I don't see a Sith being able to do any of those things, and so therefore it would be hard for me to see a Sith discovering the World Between Worlds and not having already destroyed the galaxy at this point.
Let me present a couple of counterpoints and why I would probably wind up starting out closer to Mr. Zahn's interpretation of things.
In the camp of Timothy Zahn.
That's right.
John Mills.
I will be his proxy champion during this discussion right here. Okay. First and foremost, a Sith has sent somebody out to try to find this thing. So the Sith at least know about it, right?
Yes.
2, Palpatine is able to send in that freaky blue force flame into the World Between Worlds. So he can breach the barrier, but he can't enter, right? There's some sort of trick there. So my brain taking those two things, and let's throw in the third thing about the Mortis gods, who I still maintain could have been ancient Jedi who ascended and became those beings. But you have a situation where he is pursuing Darth Plagueis' power to save people from death. It's a little fuzzy as to specifically what that means. We've also discussed, you and I, not seeing Vader with the blue flame bowl, but Dooku was. Did it have to do with Vader's, connection to the living force falling through, those sorts of things? But my brain immediately goes to two possibilities. One, setting it a little bit closer, is I'm always unclear as to whether Darth Plagueis is still canon or not, or is it canon until it's overwritten sort of thing. I enjoy the book, so I wouldn't want to lose it.
Yeah, the book,
but, yeah. Darth Plagueis, the book, I enjoy what happens in that. But what if Darth Plagueis had discovered the World Between Worlds, or the way into it, and Palpatine made his move and then found out that he couldn't replicate it, and so that, or he was about to do it with Maul. Maul was finally powerful enough. He loses Maul, and he never quite gets that magic back because he never finds the right apprentice to, and then of course dies, etc. But I would say if you want to make the case that the Sith couldn't possibly have accessed it in Plagueis' time because it would have wreaked too much havoc, I would take it back and I would go to antiquity, as it were. And we all know that there were more than two Sith when the split from the Jedi Order happened, and all of those sorts of things. And then Darth Bane was left, and he's the one that created the rule of two. What if Bane discovered a way, or all of those Sith even had discovered a way into the World Between Worlds, and to destroy them all, Bane did something that sealed off access to it again. And so the Sith spent the millennia trying to get back in there. And one of the secret ingredients was the power needs to be concentrated. And that was how they were trying to get into it. I think that's an interesting story possibility. And I think you could orchestrate a really interesting origin tale for Darth Bane and reasoning behind the rule of two and everything. If you find out that had something to do with how he wiped out all of the other Sith.
Well, I mean, Benny and Hoffman Weiss, if you're looking for story ideas, I think you found it. So,
hey guys, we're right here.
Yeah. John Mills, just call him.
I only work with Matthew Rushing. I want that to be clear.
That's so kind of you. I really appreciate that. And I only work with you, sir. But so I was thinking about this whole idea, though. in connection with why Palpatine, obviously he can't get there, and it does seem like for some reason the only thing that allows him to get in there is because of Ezra being in there, and so it does seem like it's something that the Sith have not figured out how to get in, or it's just that they had not passed on the secret of how to get in to each other. And so maybe it died, like you said. Maybe it dies with Bane. And so now the Sith only have these rumors, and that's what... And, of course, the Jedi have the ability to do it, and that's one of the things that makes them jealous.
Okay, what if we draw a compromise? We find a middle ground here, and we go back to when all of the Sith are there, rebelling against the Jedi, trying to overthrow them a millennia beforehand. Somehow, we wind up in the world between worlds with Jedi and Sith fighting and going back and forth. The Sith get wiped out.
Wow.
Right? The Sith get wiped out. But as part of the wiping out or whatever, however that looks, Bane gets thrown into one of those portals into a time he doesn't necessarily belong to. Right? And so that's why the Jedi think the Sith were all wiped out 1,000 years ago. What are you talking about? And you find out that Bane got thrown back like 2 or 3 months, knew it was coming, and said, rule of 2. Something bad's about to happen. And that's why he's able to go off and hide, and it takes everybody by surprise when they come back.
Yes. Now, I think that also has some validity to it, although we do kind of run into the problem that, Dave has made it pretty clear that this is not about puddle hopping. I'm referencing the Chronicles of Narnia there for anyone who's not. And that world between worlds where you can literally jump from one puddle to the next, and you can actually go to a different world and a whole different time, I guess, too, really. And so... it makes me wonder, what and that becomes a question. Okay, what are the actual mechanics of this? Like how what's too far and what's not too far. But I do think that it's a great the road that you're going down right now. I think makes it feel more plausible than I thought before.
Cool.
And I think that's really neat, because I do think that you could maybe work around some things and make this doable if you kind of... And the main thing would be this, is you'd have to create some very specific rules on how this, this works, because you'd need to know what could not be broken. And I'm pretty sure Dave probably has those ideas in his mind, and we were talking about that obviously in the panel with Henry, and he said, I don't totally understand it all. He said, for him, and you can go listen to this. I think I've got it out on the 602 Club feed, the Rebels panel. But he mentioned, that this really came from conversations that George and Dave had about the Force, and much of that came from the Mortis conversations, and then this. And so I think that's really interesting. So
here's a question though, because I'm not necessarily married to the idea that like I'm right or you're right or anybody's right. Like this is obviously something like really conceptual that we're talking about here.
Yeah, no, it's a great thought. I mean, the fact that you're kind of like getting me to come over to your side just a little bit and see the validity of that, I think is really cool. And I just think it shows how fascinating the idea actually is as an idea itself. I think one of the things is, I was thinking George always told them when they were doing the Clone Wars is, just go for it. Don't be afraid to do something,
Right.
And I have no thought that he wouldn't tell them, oh, that's too far if he felt like it was. But I really do feel as though this would be one of those moments where, you just keep going and you keep pushing. And, do you get to that point where you think like, oh, okay, this is too far. So I guess that that question I want to ask you: do you think that it's too far to do that, or do you feel like it doesn't hurt the foundation, I guess, of Star Wars at all to do something like this, where you might start to introduce some things like, I guess in some ways we're really introducing time travel to Star Wars.
I don't know if I would. I agree with you that, and to speak to that point, absolutely, you've got to be so incredibly careful about how you construct it, that you can't do this one on the fly. And that's one of the things that I love, honestly, the most about Mortis and the Yoda arc and the World Between Worlds. Is it's obviously not on the fly. There's a lot of extreme care about what we're showing and how we establish it. And the only thing that really makes me, besides the possibilities of if you do it right, it could really be awesome, the other thing that appeals to me is we know, from watching the Clone Wars and studying Star Wars and listening to the creators, Gilroy, Lucas, Filoni, obviously, and Zahn and all of the others, right, is if we know that at its core level there is this sort of war for existence between the light and the dark side of the Force that's going on in this whole other meta plane, and we already know that the sun is there, and the sun is a real stinker in Mortis.
Right.
I just think that I'm open to the possibility, because if it existed and there was a way that the light side had given the Jedi to get in, there's no way the dark side isn't hiding around the corner going, oh, really? Well, and that, I think, even opens up the possibilities of that actually backs me into a corner, because maybe that's why the Sith haven't managed to get in, is if they do, lights out. So there is a way to get in. There's a back door. There's a key, but the dark side hasn't figured it out as of yet. So maybe we could even tell a story in the future where the Sith do get in. Somehow they resurrect and get in. What if the Knights of Ren are the ones who get in? Maybe. I don't know.
I think, to me, the thing that it does is it does open a lot of doors, I guess, pun intended, to what you can do. And the idea that possibly in the past, and I really think that you did come up with something it's actually kind of brilliant, that this has to do with maybe the war between the Sith and the Jedi thousands of years ago. It has to do with the connection between the Mortis gods. It possibly has to do with maybe, the beings that became the Force priestesses. I feel like, you can get so mythic with this. And one of the one thing that I found fascinating is, and I just kind of realized this in the panel, and it made me feel very stupid to say this, but that, this World Between Worlds is really, I think, the way to show to actually show what Obi-Wan Kenobi said, which is it binds the galaxy together, the Force, and that the Force truly does bind the galaxy together, and that there's actually a way to see that, literally see the way that the galaxy is bound together. Now, one of the things that Gilroy mentioned in the panel, which I also thought was interesting, was that he felt as though that the World Between Worlds would possibly look different or be a different experience for somebody else going in to the World Between Worlds, and so that this was Ezra's experience. Now, obviously, Ahsoka has that same experience because she's pulled into it by Ezra, and she experiences the same thing as well. But Gilroy did say something very specific as well, which is he doesn't feel like it's like the cave on Dagobah in that sense. But he did say that, that you would hear different voices, so that the setup might be the same with all the different portals and everything. But what you experienced, as in what you probably saw in those portals, the voices you heard through the Force would be different. So it would be a unique experience for each person who went in, depending on who they were and kind of, I guess, what they brought with them.
But see, wouldn't that be so fascinating too, to find out that if it does function that way, which makes sense. I think he's spot on with that sort of idea that it would be different for everybody. But what if this place, this could be something where it's like, for Ezra or Ahsoka or a light side user, it is this thing. You see these things from the past, and you come to, basically it seems to be about coming to peace. You can't change this. This is what you see. And if it's different for everybody, what if it's like this intermediary place where the Sith don't realize they don't want to get in there because it's essentially to them hell, because they wind up seeing all of these things that they can't change. And what are the Sith all about? Control. So Palpatine thinks, I'm going to get it. Maybe that could be its own brilliant sort of story, is a Sith does get in there, and he or she, they wind up finding out they're trapped. Ooh. And they're looking at all of these things, and they have to relive the mistakes that they made. And they have to, although if they find a way in, maybe what it is unlike Ezra able to pull Ahsoka out and into the world between worlds, maybe all the Sith can use it for is knowledge, and that's when they duck out back into the real world. So that could tie into the Bane thing. Bane ducks in. He sees, oh my gosh, the Jedi fleet's going to be here in 6 months. I better duck out and prepare. He can't influence it. He can't change it. But he can go back to his own time and plan for it. Although that in and of itself could be the trick, because he doesn't know whether he's seeing the future or the past with certain things.
Yeah, I think that's a really good thought process. And I think it flies into the whole idea, and it really expands on that whole idea of seeing the future, and is that harmful? Is that good? Because as Yoda says, always in motion is the future. And he tells Luke to be careful with that idea. And I think it also brings to mind the reason why somebody like Qui-Gon is so, be in the here and now. Focus on what's happening now. Take in all of what you're seeing, process that, and deal with that. And that is an interesting thing, because I feel like the Jedi would get into the world between worlds. And the whole beauty of the world between worlds is giving you that possibility to see these images and things that allow you to be able to learn from others' mistakes, to be able to take those lessons and gain wisdom and knowledge that can help make you and who when you get out better people, because of what you've experienced and the knowledge you've gained by being able to learn the lessons from other people's lives.
Maybe that we could say that this is a reason why Palpatine is a Sith. Maybe other Sith this wouldn't be a bar to them. But I think as we talk about this and we talk about, accessing and everything and knowledge and wisdom is the key there. Perhaps access to the world between worlds is our clearest sign, in essence, that Ezra is a Jedi, that he's reached a certain stage of enlightenment that's necessary to get in there. And so you could lock the Sith out by saying the Sith pursue knowledge, not wisdom. And the Jedi sometimes pursue wisdom to the exclusion of knowledge. And that, that leads to their own problems. But maybe that's why the Sith can't get in there. I mean, to put it in gaming terms, they can't ever roll a high enough wisdom to get into the world between worlds. And so they continually fail that check. But I would, because as we're talking about it now, I really think I need to rewatch season 4 again now, because I think maybe this is our signal, because everything does pivot on this, that Ezra has reached a certain level of enlightenment and become a Jedi.
I'm also wondering too, obviously, you connect this with the Yoda arc and Yoda getting the gift that he's going to get to be able to be one with the Force. He's going to pass that on to Kenobi. This whole idea of the world between worlds being kind of opened and Yoda being able to help and influences Ezra's way of thinking through it. And, Ezra almost seemingly being given this mission by the Force to make sure that this doesn't fall into Sith hands. And then passing his test with flying colors where he refuses the gift of Palpatine, his false angels, hey, I will, you can get your parents back. He does the very thing that Anakin can never do. And then, of course, he wins the day by, calling the Purgle in and takes Thrawn away. So what it seems to me is kind of setting up that in many ways, Ezra is the Jedi that Luke isn't.
Oh, yeah. But see that, and the thing is, this is definitely something to table, but I think that he and Luke aren't too far apart until some things happen in Luke's future that are being debated vigorously over the last year, and we have the Jedi wisdom not to debate right here. But I think that Luke did hit that stage of enlightenment in Return of the Jedi, just in a different way. But I think it would have been so interesting, so fascinating to see whether, because we know that Luke went on his own artifact hunt after Return of the Jedi. We've gotten hints of that at the least. I would love to know whether Luke ever got into the world between worlds, or whether it's just shut permanently after Rebels.
Yeah, I think that would be interesting. I would say no, but because I feel like he would have made maybe different choices if he had been in a place like that and really being able to gain that experience and that knowledge and that wisdom. But I do think that you really have hit on something with this whole idea of the fact that, Ezra, and I think this is one of the genius things about Rebels, is the fact that, and I had this argument with somebody on Twitter about, whether the Rebels should have been responsible for sealing the Death Star plans and stuff like that. And, I think that Filoni made a very wise choice with the writers, like Henry Gilroy and the rest of the writers there on Rebels, which is giving them their own story so that it stands alone, in the sense that these rebels had their own mission they were chosen for. And I think, this storyline and this idea of Ezra and the world between worlds and all of these things, it really helps them. They win this battle, and without them winning this battle and this part of the war, what happens then in Rogue One and then the rest of the original trilogy can't happen, because Palpatine has the ultimate control of the entire galaxy and possibly destroys it by meddling within the world between worlds. And so I think, to me, that's something that really galvanizes who these rebels were, and adding these cool things like this just open up for more storytelling in the future.
Oh no, absolutely. I agree with the fact that Ezra, I think that this pathway also puts Ezra sort of a step removed, so that it's more believable that the Force didn't tell somebody else, like Luke didn't realize, blah, 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 however you want to reason that one out. But something that I keep coming back to, it would be fascinating to look at this world between worlds and say that, and I'm not saying this to be caustic, but maybe Luke makes a dark side error by peering into Kylo through his own personal lens. He reaches out through himself to look into Kylo's future, as opposed to the world between worlds shows you time as it is, objectively. Whereas Luke looks at Ben's future through the lens of his own fear
Right.
which is part of the dark. Fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, hate leads to suffering. Luke's own fear is the lens that distorts things, whereas the world between worlds would have shown him the world as it was.
Yeah. I think that definitely is a way to actually help the story in The Last Jedi in some ways, to make it make some semblance of sense there with the Luke character and the choice that he makes at that moment. I think that is definitely a way to help that for sure.
So what we need really is we need Timothy Zahn to write a story where Luke's spirit encounters Ezra in the world between worlds, and Luke realizes, oh no, that was the error that I made. Or Luke encounters Ahsoka.
Yeah. See, and this is I think this is the fascinating thing that, for me, is that, one of the things that I've loved about the Star Wars animated series is I feel like that they have been where the richness has come from in storytelling. And this whole idea, I just saw an article on the BBC. I didn't read it, but I saw the headline that, Star Wars should have stopped with just episode 4. It should have just been Star Wars and that's it. Never
blah, blah,
continued.
blah, blah, blah,
Right.
blah, blah.
But the thing that I was thinking is that in context of that idea, for me, the richest storytelling in Star Wars really has come through these animated series, and that's not the richest. I don't mean that, but I mean just some of the richest parts of the Star Wars galaxy have really come because George had the opportunity to spend a lot of time on the Clone Wars, and then of course Dave gets to continue that mindset in Rebels, and I think there's something about that.
I definitely think amount of screen time affects it, but I also think, if I may be so bold as to suggest it, that the movies occur on such a big stage that, much like Luke, there's such a fear of failure that sometimes they second guess themselves a little too much. Whereas when you get over to the shows like Rebels, there's a freer sense of what they can get away with. And so I'm not saying there's no pressure when you're working on that, and that I'm not saying that there's no pressure. I'm saying that it's a different type of pressure. It's a different type of pressure to say, what can we do that's crazy, that's going to catch people off guard and go nuts, versus I'm afraid I'm going too crazy and it's going to catch people off guard and it's not going to work. It's just a different type of pressure crystallizing in different. I mean, it could even be, maybe there's a big think piece about this to write, comparing sort of like the risk taking, in one medium versus another. Because how many times nowadays, especially, let's move it out of animation, but you talk about something like Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul, Walking Dead, Mad Men. These shows are known for taking chances that big screen movies won't. Maybe it's just a difference in the media.
I also kind of feel like it's a difference in thought process. I mean, when you think about the original 6 Star Wars films, and of course the Clone Wars, I feel like they all take some serious amounts of risk in that. And, I think one of the things I always appreciated about George was his willingness to try something, and if it didn't work, it didn't work. He'd admit it and he'd move on. I don't think he thinks Howard the Duck was a huge success. So I think he would readily admit that it didn't work the way that they wanted it to.
I'm sorry. I will never forget when somebody sued him about the idea of the Ewoks, and he was fighting that court battle against the guy because the guy claimed that he came up with it, et cetera, et cetera. I will never forget Lucas's one quote was, "I noticed nobody sued me over Howard the Duck."
Yeah.
And that was just one of the most, obviously it stuck with me through the years, where I was like, that is just the most beautiful, eloquent, come on, seriously? That I've ever heard in response to an accusation like that. It was just beautiful.
But I think, bringing it kind of full circle, I think one of the ideas, and this is one of the things, again, that I think the animated series have done, and especially the world between worlds and this whole idea with the Sith and the Jedi and all this comes down to, I really want to see this story idea, thousands of years ago, because I do feel like, and this is what, look, as much as I like the KOTOR game, Knights of the Old Republic, I will say that there is a problem with it in the sense that it really doesn't look like it's thousands of years ago. It pretty much just looks like Star Wars,
right,
with some minor differences. But I think this kind of story is a place that you really could create a completely different feel thousands of years ago. It does feel a lot more medieval in some ways. There's still obviously space travel and all those kind of things, but wouldn't it be kind of cool if, the ships are actually built on Purgle, and there's that kind of thing, like Jedi riding on Purgle and space.
Yeah, well,
and I mean, come on. I mean, if we can have, the Aquaman trailer where they're riding on sharks and stuff like that, I'm just thinking, how crazy could we get? This would be just amazing.
It would, and pull in Zahn's own thing where he opens Vader up to navigating through hyperspace.
Yes,
maybe we
yes.
exist in a time where Jedi, discover their connection to the Force, and that's the only way you get around the galaxy, is you need somebody who's Force sensitive to do it, and that's sort of how how
because they
Force
haven't
sensitive
built maybe
spread.
the computers complicated
Right.
enough yet to be able to do those kind of calculations.
And so you even have this added story layer of technology being just another means of magic, and that, it takes some of the miracle away, but it's still a miracle that it happens at all. And I mean, you got a whole, what? I think, like you said, they need to come to us here at Aggressive Negotiations, and we can pitch some ideas to them for sure. But if anybody wants to pitch ideas to you, Matt, where can they find you online?
Yeah. As we mentioned earlier, I'm over on Twitter, MattRushing02, and I'm also on Instagram under the same name. Would love to catch up with anybody there. Met so many great people at Dragon Con, and would love to talk to you. Even if you didn't go to Dragon Con, I love getting to interact with listeners that way. It's just an awesome privilege to be able to talk Star Wars with people day in and day out. And just thank you for listening. Really means a lot that people that you listen, and really appreciate you so much. And so you can also find me here on the network doing Owl Post with Drea Kaufman, talking about Harry Potter one chapter at a time. I'm over on the Trek FM network doing a show called the 602 Club, which is our general geek show where we talk all things geeky. We talk a lot of Star Wars over there too, but also, as many different franchises as we can cram into that show, we're doing. So if you just like great geek talk from a positive angle, that's a place to be. You can also find me over there doing The Orb with Chris Jones, talking about Star Trek Deep Space Nine, and that show's called The Orb. And then last but not least, I'm doing a show with my friend Courtney. It's called Cinema Stories, and we talk about films through the lens of faith. But, John, I'm not the only one who's out there plugging away in the vast void of social media. Where can people find you?
Well, it's hard out here for Jedi Master, Matt, but you can find me over on Twitter at KesselJunkie. You can find me, it's on hiatus right now, but I promise you, Great Shot Kid is coming back. We got some big things planned, and that's right here on the Nerd Party Network. It's coming back soon. Entertain yourself with the old catalog up to this point until we come back in full force. You can find me co-hosting Words with Nerds with my pal Craig, and outside of that, I'm usually ghostwriting tweets for several people online. I'm the Bruce Valanche of tweeting. Wait, I think I just insulted myself. I'm not sure. But Matt, all of that being said, I think there's really only one thing left to say. I think it's time to close negotiations.
John, negotiations are closed.
Join the revolution. Join the Nerd Party.